Sando titulo. 22. Where magic turns scraps into gold. Have you ever looked at your kitchen scraps? The onion skins, the coffee grounds, the wilted lettuce, and felt like you were literally throwing money in the trash. I've been there. For years, I'd haul heavy bags of synthetic fertilizer from Home Depot, hoping to give my garden that magic boost, only to realize I had the best fertilizer in the world sitting right in my compost bin. Or rather, I would have had it if I hadn't been so intimidated by worms. If you've ever felt like composting was too messy, too smelly, or just too creepy because of the worms, I want to talk to you. This isn't about a science project, it's about black gold. Today, we are breaking down the absolute basics of vermicomposting using red wiggler worms to turn your trash into a nutrient-dense soil elixir that your plants will absolutely go crazy for. By the end of this, you'll know the exact bedding to food ratio that keeps a bin healthy. And I'm going to share the one massive mistake I made early on that almost led to a fruit fly invasion in my laundry room. We'll start with why these worms are different from the ones in your yard, and then we'll dive straight into setting up the perfect home for your new subterranean employees. Stick with me, because at the 50-second mark of your first week, you'll already see a change in how you view your garbage. Let's start with the basics. Red wigglers versus earthworms. One of the biggest mistakes I see beginners make, and I'll admit, I did this too, is going out into the backyard after a rainstorm, digging up a handful of thick, gray earthworms, and tossing them into a plastic bin with some old banana peels. I thought I was being resourceful. 2 weeks later, I had a bin full of dead worms and a very unhappy smell. What nobody tells you at the store is that the worms in your garden soil are deep burrowers. They need feet of vertical space and cool, dense earth to thrive. They aren't designed to live in a shallow bin eating kitchen scraps. For vermicomposting, you need Eisenia fetida, commonly known as red wigglers. These little guys are surface dwellers. In nature, they live in the leaf litter on the forest floor. They love shallow environments, they breathe through their skin, and most importantly, they can eat half their body weight in scraps every single day. If you want a magic elixir, you need the right magicians. You can find them online or at local nurseries. Just don't try to recruit the ones from your lawn. They are uniquely adapted for life in a bin, and they won't try to burrow to the center of the earth. I want to save you money and frustration right out of the gate, so let's talk about the bin itself. You don't need to spend $200 on a fancy stacking system. I've tried them all, and honestly, a simple 10-gallon plastic tote from a big box store works just as well, if not better, for a beginner. The key is air and drainage. Think of your worm bin like a tiny apartment. If there's no ventilation, it gets stuffy and moldy. If there's no plumbing, it floods. I remember my first bin. I was so worried about worms escaping that I barely drilled any holes. The result was a soggy, anaerobic mess that smelled like swamp gas. Don't be like me. Drill half-inch holes all along the top of the bin for airflow and several smaller holes in the bottom for drainage. Place that bin inside a second, slightly larger bin to catch any liquid. This liquid is often called leachate, and while it's not the worm tea everyone raves about, it's still full of nutrients if used correctly. Now, let's talk about the bedding. This is the foundation of your bin. Imagine if someone threw you into a room full of food but gave you no bed or floor to walk on. You'd be miserable. The bedding is the carbon or browns of your system. The best material for this is something you probably have in abundance: shredded cardboard and newspaper. I spent an afternoon once shredding old Amazon boxes while watching a ball game, and that lasted me months. Avoid the glossy, colorful ads. The inks can be toxic to the worms. Soak the shredded cardboard in a bucket of water, then wring it out until it's the consistency of a damp sponge. Not dripping, just moist. This is the Goldilocks zone. If it's too dry, the worm's skin will dry out and they will die. If it's too wet, they will drown. Fill your bin about 3/4 full with this fluffy, damp cardboard. It provides the structure and the air pockets they need to move. This is the first step to a smell-free bin. If you get the bedding right, 80% of your work is done. Many people think you need to add soil to a worm bin. You don't. In fact, adding too much backyard soil can introduce pests or pathogens. All the worms need is that damp cardboard and a handful of grit-like crushed eggshells or a sprinkle of sand to help them digest their food. Remember, they don't have teeth. They use the grit in their gizzard to grind up the food scraps. It's a fascinating process. Once you have your bedding and your grit, you're ready for the worms. When you first release them into the bin, they might be a little flighty. They've likely been in a dark shipping box for a few days, and they're stressed. Leave a light on over the bin for the first 24 hours. Since worms hate light, this will encourage them to dive deep into their new bedding and settle in rather than trying to climb the walls to explore your kitchen. I want to protect you from the guilt of a slow start. A new worm bin takes time to establish its microbial colony. You might not see much action for the first week or two. That's normal. The worms need to wait for the bacteria to start breaking down the bedding and food before they can actually eat it. They aren't actually eating the banana peel itself. They are slurping up the microbial soup that forms on the surface of the rotting peel. It sounds a bit gross, but it's the most efficient recycling system on the planet. I lived through the frustration of thinking my worms weren't eating, only to realize I just needed to be patient. As you set up this environment, think about the placement of your bin. In the US, our climates vary wildly. If you live in a place like Minnesota, your bin cannot stay in the garage over the winter. It will turn into a worm popsicle. If you're in Arizona, the summer heat will cook them in hours. The ideal temperature is between 55 degrees Fahrenheit and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. For most of us, that means keeping the bin indoors. Under the kitchen sink, in a laundry room, or in a basement is perfect. I keep mine in my office. People come over for coffee and have no idea there are thousands of worms working just 3 feet away. That's the beauty of a well-managed bin. It's invisible and silent. You know why this happens even when you water correctly. I'll show you the reason in the next part. O motivo pelo qual isso acontece, mesmo quando você controla a humidade perfeitamente, resume-se geralmente a química do caixote. Veja, sistema de vermicompostagem não é apenas uma caixa com minhocas. É ecossistema vivo de micróbios, fungos e bactérias. Aprendi isto da maneira mais difícil durante o meu segundo mês. Estava tão entusiasmado por alimentar as minhas minhocas que despejei liquidificador cheio de restos de fruta num canto do caixote. Em 3 dias, a caixa estava a aquecer como uma zona miniatura e as minhas minhocas estavam literalmente a tentar rastejar para fora pelos buracos de ar para escapar. Eu não me tinha apercebido de que tinha acidentalmente iniciado uma compostagem quente dentro de espaço confinado. Se isto já aconteceu, não é falta de habilidade. Você não tem polegar preto. Apenas recebeu conselhos incompletos. Se as suas minhocas estão a tentar fugir, é apenas sinal de que o ambiente mudou. E é uma correção muito fácil quando se sabe o que procurar. Vamos falar sobre a alimentação dos seus trabalhadores. É aqui que a magia acontece, transformar aquela cuve mercha em ouro negro. A regra de ouro para caixote sável é o método da alimentação em bolsos. Em vez de espalhar comida por toda a superfície, escolha canto do caixote. Cave pequeno buraco no material de cama, o papel cartão. Coloque os restos e depois, esta é a parte mais importante, cubra-os novamente com, pelo menos, 5 centímetros de cama úmida. Este método de capeamento é o que evita as moscas da fruta e mantém o cheiro afastado. Se deixar uma casca de banana exposta no topo, está essencialmente a colocar letreiro de neon para todos os mosquitos da vizinhança. Ao enterrar a comida, está a permitir que os microbios iniciem o processo de decomposição, onde as minhocas podem ser com segurança. Mas o que deve exatamente dar-lhes de comer? Atenha-se à lista verde e limpa. Restos de fruta, cascas de vegetais, boras de café, com filtro e tudo, e cascas de ovo esmagadas são os elementos principais. As cascas de ovo são, na verdade, uma arma secreta. Elas fornecem grau que ajuda as minhocas a digerir a comida, já que não tem dentes, e o cálcio ajuda a equilibrar a acidez do caixote. Agora, o meu conselho de protetor, evite os três grandes, carne, laticínios e óleo. Estes não matam necessariamente as minhocas, mas vão apodrecer e atrair ao larvas indesejadas. Além disso, tenha muito cuidado com citrinos e cebolas em excesso. Num coiote pequeno, a acidez de uma dúzia de cascas de laranja pode queimar a pele sensível das minhocas. Eu perdi uma colônia inteira porque pensei, é tudo orgânico, não faz mal. Faz mal sim. Mantenha os citrinos no mínimo. Uma das perguntas mais frequentes que recebo de quem vai ver apartamentos ou condomínios é sobre a síndrome do caixote encharcado. Você abre a tampa e aquilo parece pantano. Isto acontece geralmente porque vegetais como a abóbora ou a melancia são maioritariamente água. Quando se decompõem, todo esse líquido fica no caixote. Se ver água acumulada no fundo, não entre em pânico. Basta adicionar mais cartão ou papel triturado seco. Funciona como uma esponja, absorverá o excesso de umidade e fornecerá cama fresca ao mesmo tempo. Eu mantenho sempre saco de papel triturado seco ao lado do meu caixote apenas para estas emergências de absorção. É uma correção de 10 segundos que salva toda a operação e mantém o equilíbrio que as Red Wigglers precisam para trabalhar a todo o vapor. Muitos americanos sentem-se culpados quando se esquecem de alimentar as minhocas por uma semana, mas a verdade é que estas pequenas criaturas são os animais de estimação mais independentes que pode ter. Na natureza, elas sobrevivem a períodos de escassez comendo o próprio material de cama. Por isso, se for de férias por 10 dias, elas ficarão perfeitamente bem. O que não pode ignorar é a ventilação. Se o caixote ficar sem oxigênio, as bactérias anaeróbias assumem o controle e aí que o cheiro a ovo pode aparecer. Se sentir esse cheiro, o seu caixote gritar por ar e por mais castanhos, papel e cartão. Lembre-se, o material de cama é tão importante quanto a comida deve ser sempre a maior parte do volume do seu sistema. Ao manter este equilíbrio, você está a criar fertilizante que é 10 vezes mais potente que o composto comum. Os excrementos de minhoca contêm uma película mucosa que permite que os nutrientes sejam libertados lentamente para que não queimem as raízes das suas plantas como os fertilizantes químicos da loja fazem muitas vezes. É a proteção definitiva para o seu jardim e para a sua carteira. Mas há detalhe. Por vezes o problema não é a planta, nem a comida. É o vaso. Heads up. Há erro simples que faz com que esta planta perde florescer. Vou mostrar-lhe como evitá-lo num momento. Actually, the biggest mistake I see doesn't even happen inside the bin, it happens when people try to use the results too early. I've seen so many gardeners take a handful of half-processed bedding and throw it directly into a decorative pot, only to find their favorite houseplant wilting a week later. I call this the immature compost trap. If the scraps haven't been fully digested by the worms, the decomposition process continues in your plant's pot, which can actually steal nitrogen from your plant's roots instead of giving it. I learned this the hard way with a beautiful fiddle leaf fig. I thought I was feeding it a gourmet meal, but I was actually starving it. You have to wait for that consistent, crumbly dark brown texture that looks like rich coffee grounds. This is the stage where the nutrients are locked and loaded, ready to be absorbed by your garden without any negative side effects. When your bin is full of that beautiful black gold, it's time for the harvest. This is the part that intimidates people because they don't want to hurt the worms or spend 5 hours picking them out one by one. I want to save you that frustration. I'm going to give you my light migration trick that saves your back and your time. Worms are photophobic, they hate light. It's their only real enemy in this environment. Instead of sifting through the dirt with a screen, which can be messy and damaging to the worm cocoons, just move all the finished compost to one side of the bin. On the other side, put fresh, damp bedding and a big pile of high-value treats, like a bruised mango, some melon rinds, or even a few strawberry tops. Within 48 hours, about 90% of your worms will have migrated over to the new house for the party, leaving the finished castings behind in a clean pile for you to scoop out. I remember the first time I harvested my bin. I was so nervous I'd miss a worm that I spent 3 hours under a desk lamp with a pair of tweezers. Looking back, I realize how much I overcomplicated it. The showcase versus real home reality is that a few worms ending up in your garden bed or your outdoor pots is actually a good thing. They'll continue to work the soil there. Don't aim for 100% perfection, aim for progress. Your plants won't care if there are 2 or 3 red wigglers in the soil, but they will care about the incredible microbial life you're introducing. Now let's talk about the soil elixir or worm tea. This is where the real magic happens. You can certainly mix the solid castings into your potting soil. About a 20% ratio is perfect for most American backyard staples like tomatoes, peppers, or those petunias on your porch. But if you want to stretch your black gold further, you need to brew it. There's a common misconception that the liquid dripping out of the bottom of your bin, the leachate, is worm tea. It's not. In fact, if your bin is producing a lot of drainage, it's a sign things are too wet and potentially anaerobic. Real worm tea is made by steeping the finished castings in a bucket of dechlorinated water. Just let your tap water sit out for 24 hours with a spoonful of unsulfured molasses. The molasses acts as a fuel source for the beneficial bacteria. I remember using this brew for the first time on a row of struggling hydrangeas in my backyard. They had yellowing leaves and hadn't bloomed in 2 seasons. I gave them a deep soak with the worm tea, and within 2 weeks, the leaves turned a deep, waxy green. By the next month, I had blooms the size of softballs. It felt like I had discovered a secret cheat code that the big fertilizer companies didn't want me to know about. This is why I do this, to protect you from spending money on blue powders and chemical sprays when you can brew a superior product in a 5-gallon bucket for pennies. One thing to keep in mind for my friends in the southern states or the hotter USDA zones: moisture is your constant battle. In a dry climate, your bin will lose water faster than you think. I found that placing a single sheet of damp burlap or a piece of bubble wrap, bubble side down, on top of the bedding acts as a moisture barrier. It keeps the humidity high right at the surface, which encourages the worms to feed all the way to the top. This simple home hack can double your production speed during a dry July or August. If you're worried about the space, remember that vermicomposting is the ultimate small-scale solution. You don't need a farm, you just need a corner. I've seen successful bins in studio apartments in NYC and in suburban garages in Dallas. The scale changes, but the biology remains the same. You are essentially managing a tiny underground livestock operation. And just like any livestock, if you keep them fed, hydrated, and ventilated, they will produce for you indefinitely. But what happens when things go wrong? Because eventually they might. Maybe you see a few tiny white mites, or perhaps the bin feels a bit too warm to the touch. Don't panic. These are all signs that the engine is running, and usually a simple adjustment of the air to bedding ratio is all it takes to get things back on track. I'll show you exactly how to read these signs so you never feel overwhelmed. Alert. And heads up, there's a simple mistake that makes this plant stop blooming. I'll show you how to avoid it in just a moment.